Is it true that someone with an anxious, preoccupied attachment style will sometimes struggle to give you what you need or what you ask for? Well, this may sound strange given AP's tendency to focus on connections in other people. But yes, this does happen sometimes. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why and what to do about it. Hey everyone, I'm Sonia, and on this channel, I give you tips and strategies for healing your attachment style, for having your best relationships, and for having your best life overall. And if you'd like to get on my list to get occasional further tips and strategies, go ahead and do so in the description box below. You'll also at the same time get a worksheet which can help you with some further guidance around your attachment style and relationships when you do so. And if you need any individualized help with any of this, check out below as well. I do 20-minute consultations to see if we'd be a good fit for coaching, but I can also potentially point you to all kinds of other resources as well. Okay, so this is part of a series about when someone, probably your partner, struggles to give you something that you're asking for. Perhaps it's a need you've identified or a change you want to make, based on attachment style. So we already did dismissive avoidant and fearful avoidant, and this one's going to look a little bit different. I mean, they all have their own nuances, but this is going to look a little different because aren't, anxious, preoccupied people these people pleasers? Isn't this what they do? Try to meet other people's needs? And yes, that is true. But there are some circumstances where it's going to be a struggle for them. And because of this difference, I'm going to start this video, unlike the other ones, with an example, just so you can see one way that it could look, sort of more concretely. So let's say that the partner of an anxious, preoccupied person has asked for more space in some way. Perhaps they're, dealing with something and they prefer to have some more alone time because of it. Or for whatever other reason. Maybe it's just that there's a mismatch, in the styles of how often they want to be in connection versus have alone time, as compared to the anxious preoccupied person who tends to want a lot of together time. So they've asked for this, and often the anxious preoccupied person, like I said, because they're very attuned to the other person, they really want to meet other people's needs, will try. Like they'll try to not text if they're thinking about them when they normally would, and, try to wait longer to get together, all of those things, that whatever that is that was specifically asked for, they will try. But it can be very difficult. And so often an anxious, preoccupied person not only will become more anxious during that time frame, but they will often reach out, some sort of justify to themselves a reason for reaching out earlier, that kind of thing. So it's often a struggle. That's a very good example that happens quite frequently. That's a struggle for an anxious preoccupied to give the other person what they're needing or asking for in the relationship. And so, as you might guess, since we're doing this based on attachment style, it's really the key features of this attachment style that are at play here as to the why. Why is this difficult for them? So, like with the other styles, there's a core wound getting triggered. Often it's an I'm abandoned core wound for an anxious preoccupied person. Sometimes there can be a mix also of limiting beliefs. And I'm going to have a video soon where I talk about the difference between a core wound and a limiting belief, just to tease that out a little more. So the actual asking for that space by the partner, I think you can see the link pretty easily that could trigger an I am abandoned core wound in an anxious preoccupied, or it could trigger that as well as other limiting beliefs that are more specific around, like, that a partner wants space for me when I start to get close, or something like that. So that core wound and potential limiting beliefs as well that are related is the reason why the anxious preoccupied person becomes, dysregulated around when there's the space being taken. There's also truth to the fact that it can be that mismatch of needs, right? Like the anxious preoccupied person does have that need also, often for more connection than someone else might. And so as we get into talking about what to do about it, both from a partner's perspective and from the anxious preoccupied person themselves, I will definitely touch on addressing that as well, that there can actually be the need going on for the anxious preoccupied person that isn't getting met then in that case. Okay, so one of the whys is that the core wound, like with the other styles, is getting activated. So, and then also similar to the other styles is particularly the dismissive avoidant. Then this can lead sort of to almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, in the sense that, what did I say the anxious preoccupied person did? they maybe couldn't quite go the whole time, or they, reached out and justified to themselves why. And very often in the other person, that's going to mean that that person doesn't like it, that what they agreed on didn't happen. And so they might get some negative feedback, right? They might get negative feedback. The person might be like withdraw even more. And so that becomes then something that then feeds right back into that loop, right? Then it feeds right back into that core wound cycle, makes the anxious preoccupied person feel more anxious and have that core wound triggered more with limiting beliefs. And so you can see how, unfortunately, then you're into sort of more of a negative. I might not go so far as to say spiral, it's going to vary in each case, but it is into this sort of negative loop then. And that becomes even stronger, like I said, with the anxious preoccupied's perception of certainly disconnect, but potentially abandonment as well. Okay, so that's sort of the background on what's going on. So if you are the person in that relationship with the anxious preoccupied, in my example, it would be the partner, what can you do about this? So as with the other styles, it goes a long, long way to understand what's going on, right? It's not, this helps us not personalize it, right? And also to not make it sort of intentionally negative. Like a person can't help it that they have this attachment style. Now that doesn't take away responsibility for dealing with it. And that's why we'll talk about, both people's responsibility in it. But it goes a long way to not personalizing, to not, putting bad intent there. So, because you could imagine the partner saying, oh, well, they don't respect my boundary or my need at all. Or they might say to themselves, this person's controlling. They don't want to let me take space or to take some time to myself. So this understanding of what's really going on can go a long way towards dispelling that. And dispelling that is really key towards actually going towards solutions that will help. Okay, so a big way to help this right off the front proactively is if you're going to ask for something like this and your partner is has an anxious preoccupied attachment style, or you think they do, that you start off with reassurance and like a lot of explanation. For anxious preoccupied people don't necessarily need as much explanation as like a fearful avoidant would, but a good amount of explanation. So it's kind of trying to counteract the idea that you're somehow disconnecting from them, or that's your intention, or that it's that you're going to leave the relationship or abandon them in some way emotionally. So if you can start off with like really explaining, this is just the way I am, being positive about the relationship. I really love how we connect. When we do, this is just something unique to me. It does go a long way towards help. It doesn't mean the core wound might not get activated, but it goes a long way towards helping with that situation if you can go in proactively that way. And then let's say that you didn't do that, or maybe you did that and they're still anxious. Then it can be really important to still try to reassure, right? So that can be hard if you feel like, they're not going along with what you agreed upon. But if you can try to bring in that compassion at the same time as you still try to say, hey, I still need this time, that can be really helpful too. And so another point here, though, is to not abandon your own needs. So don't just give in on it, right? You still want to be trying to assert the need, even while you're being understanding about their attachment style and what's going on and how the core wound is being triggered and how it feels horrible to them. And then finally, and this will get into kind of the other side of the coin of what I'm going to say for anxious preoccupieds, be willing to consider like exactly what you need. Like maybe there is some level of compromise that you could do. As long as you're not abandoning the need and really not being honest about it, it can be important to take, to say to yourself, well, let's see, this was my initial idea for what I needed, but maybe there's something that would work for both of us better. Okay, so what about if you are the anxious preoccupied person in this scenario or in these kinds of cases? So again, understanding what's going on is helpful so that you don't, feel ashamed of it. And when we can come out of that place of thinking there's something that we're not doing things right, or that something shameful that we're doing, we can be much more proactive about trying to help out the situation. So one big thing in trying to get through is to try to, especially if we know and have more understanding about why we're feeling the way we do, see if you can both two things, kind of self-regulation, right? That can help. Actually, three things. So self-regulation, just actual physical nervous system regulation, whatever that is for you, whether that's deep breaths and breath work, whether that's yoga, whatever that is, And you may have, if you haven't done that before, you may sort of want to play around with try out some different things that could be helpful so you know what works best for you. So let's say in the moment you want to text, you could try to do something like that if you notice that you're feeling the anxiety piece of it. Another thing would be to seek out other connections that you have. So maybe there's a friend you could talk to, right? Because some of it is that you have that need for connection, or you're feeling disconnect, that you're not connected. And so that's a good way to channel that wanting to connect towards the partner could be, in some other way towards some other person who's in your life instead. And then the third part there is to reframe. So if you can identify, sometimes these thoughts are so subconscious, we don't hear them almost as a voice in our head or a thought. So see if you can catch something or like sense into what your belief is around the situation or what the nervousness or anxiety is about. And maybe you just have to guess based on what you know about yourself. But try to reframe it. So that would mean understanding, that other people do have those different needs for amounts of connection, and really telling yourself and reminding yourself that it's not about you, that it's not about disconnecting from the relationship. And I'm going to go far with our example. I'm going to go pretty far here and say, what if, because we get into our ideas about things, what if it's almost the opposite? Often partners will tell us their needs and actually be willing to express that and ask for it when they do feel closer to us. So maybe it's not that they feel less close to you or they don't want to be as close if you're being close to them now. It could be just the opposite. It could be that now they're really being honest with you about what they need because they do feel closer to you. Along the lines, though, of what I said about the fact that you do have a need in there, it is important, especially for anxious preoccupied people, because they are people pleasers. It's important to recognize if what's happening is something that you want to compromise on and bring in your own needs. So let's say a partner's taking so much space, and maybe it's even on a regular basis. It's not that something particular happened, but it's more like they're saying, okay, I only want to see you once a week, and you want, to see them every day. I mean, that's actually a case for compromise. So it doesn't mean not trying to respect their wishes, but it's absolutely a place where you can also be assertive with your own needs and compromise. And like I said, for the partner in the scenario, when you do the negotiation, be open to considering other ways that the partner could meet the need that are their idea that isn't maybe something you've thought of, but until you try it, you might not know if it meets that need or not. And also that it might look smaller than you initially thought. Like if you wanted to text them a few times a day and it ends up being once because they don't like texting or something, or it ends up being every other day. Just being open, like really open to what it could look like and what might work, and then trying that. So I hope this was helpful. It gives you some ideas for how this struggle to meet a partner's need can look like in these relationships, in our everyday lives, as we sort of compromise and figure things out and as things come up for each of the attachment styles. And so check out the other ones as well. Sometimes we even think a partner, is a particular attachment style. Like we might think that they're anxious preoccupied and they're actually fearful avoidant. So sometimes it can be helpful to look at those other videos also and sort of assess which one is more the situation that you're dealing with. Thanks so much for watching. And if you have any other ideas for content or any questions, please go ahead and leave a comment below.